Good evening, everyone. Today we'll be discussing some MCQs on valvular heart diseases. So the first question is, in which of the following conditions the ejection fraction is overestimated? So whether it is aortic regurgitation, aortic stenosis, mitral regurgitation, or mitral stenosis. So remember the answer is mitral regurgitation. And what happens in mitral regurgitation is that left ventricle during systole, it has to eject the volume of the blood into the aorta. But now that there is mitral regurgitation, which means that the mitral valve leaflets are not coapting, they are not meeting each other completely. So the mitral valve is not getting closed completely during systole. So now the left ventricle has to eject the blood into the aorta, but now that the mitral valve is also not closed, it ejects the blood into the left atrium also. And left atrium has a lower pressure. On the contrary, aorta, the systemic pressures are quite high. So the left ventricle easily ejects the blood into the aorta as well as into the left atrium. So that is why the end systolic volume is very low. So if you measure the ejection fraction on echocardiography in an uncorrected mitral regurgitation, if it is 55 or if it is 60%, but the moment you when you repair the valve or you replace the valve, at that point of after that, after coming off pump, so when you if you calculate the ejection fraction again by echocardiography, you will see that the ejection fraction is now decreased. Now, why is it happening? The reason is now that initially, before when the mitral regurgitation was not corrected, the left ventricle had a low pressure vent to eject the blood into that was the left atrium. But now that the mitral valve is functioning properly during systole, this left ventricle is now it only has one pathway to eject the blood. So it ejects the blood only in the aorta, which is now a high pressure circulation. So in that case, what will happen is that your ejection fraction will now fall down. So whenever it's an uncorrected mitral regurgitation, the ejection fraction is always overestimated because the left ventricle has aorta as well as the left atrium to eject its volume of blood. And the left atrium is a quite low pressure circulation. So that is why it will be easily able to empty its content into the left atrium, because of which the end systolic volume is quite low. So that is why whenever you are evaluating a patient with mitral regurgitation who's posted for mitral valve replacement or repair, the ejection fraction, normal ejection fraction in these patients is considered to be more than 60%. In a normal healthy patient, if the ejection fraction is more than 50%, you're happy. You say that the ejection fraction is normal. But this is not the case in MR. In MR, the EF has to be more than 60% for us to call it as normal ejection fraction. There's one more parameter, that is left ventricular end systolic diameter, and this has to be less than 40 millimeter, and the ejection fraction has to be more than 60% to call it as a preserved LV systolic function. So remember, in uncorrected cases of mitral regurgitation, the ejection fraction is going to be overestimated. After coming off pump, after repairing the valve, or after replacing the valve, when you calculate the ejection fraction is always going to fall down, because now the low pressure atrial vent is not available. Now the left ventricle has to work only against the high pressure systemic circulation. The next question is, what is the most common cause of valvular heart diseases in developing countries? Always remember it's a one-liner question, and the most common cause in developing countries is rheumatic heart diseases. So the causes are poor hygiene, lack of sanitation, and lack of access to antibiotics, because of which rheumatic heart disease develops in those patients with a history or even without a history of rheumatic fever, but there has to be an inciting event, that is the rheumatic fever, which is caused by the infection by Streptococcus pyogenes. So we'll see about rheumatic heart disease and rheumatic fever in the coming slides. But remember, in developing countries, rheumatic heart disease is the most common cause of mitral and aortic lesions. The most common valve that gets affected in rheumatic heart disease is the mitral valve, followed by the aortic valve, and very minimally tricuspid valve is also affected. However, in contrast, in developed countries, degenerative valvular heart diseases are more common. Degenerative, as in calcification, age-related changes leading to the development of stenosis, or regurgitation. So, degenerative causes are more common in developed countries. So, acute rheumatic fever is the result of an autoimmune response by Lancefield group A beta hemolytic streptococci. And this acute rheumatic fever, according to Duck and Jones criteria, it has major and minor manifestations. And out of the major manifestations, we have joint pain, we have cardiac valvular regurgitation, that is rheumatic carditis, we have chorea, skin and subcutaneous manifestations, and fever. And the rheumatic heart disease develops around 10 to 15 years after the rheumatic fever. And although one of the major manifestations of rheumatic fever is rheumatic carditis, but rheumatic heart disease is a completely different entity. So rheumatic carditis is basically inflammation. It's a inflammation of all the layers. It's pancarditis. It's inflammation of the valves leading to valvulitis. But rheumatic heart disease occurs because of this progressive progression of the damage that had happened during rheumatic fever. And this rheumatic heart disease presents around 10 to 15 years later. So that is the reason why when rheumatic fever develops in the age group of 5 to 14 years, but the patients with rheumatic heart disease generally present after the age of 20-25 years with valvular stenosis, valvular regurgitation. So that is rheumatic heart disease, which presents later because of a persistent damage to the valves that has happened during rheumatic fever. So that's what we were discussing, that the difference between rheumatic fever, rheumatic carditis is one of the major manifestations of rheumatic fever, and rheumatic heart disease is a persistent damage to the heart valves resulting in regurgitation initially, and then in long-standing cases there is a lot of inflammation and scarring which leads to stenosis. So initially there is regurgitation, and in the long term stenosis can happen. And then complications of these rheumatic heart disease, as we all know, it could be heart failure, it could be embolism, it could be endocarditis, and it could be atrial fibrillation also. Now, what echocardiographic features such as rheumatic etiology? Now, when you know on echocardiography, you have diagnosed the condition as either mitral stenosis, regurgitation, aortic stenosis, or regurgitation. But how to know whether the underlying cause is rheumatic? Although we know that the most common cause in developing countries like India, it is rheumatic heart disease. But then there are some criteria, there are some findings which are pertaining to rheumatic etiology. So here actually the answer is all of the above. So you have valvular thickening. So if it's a mitral stenosis, you will have a stenosed mitral valve. You will have thickened mitral valve leaflets. You will have calcified mitral valve leaflets. The subvalvular apparatus of the mitral valve will be thickened. It will be fused. What is a subvalvular apparatus? There is a chordae tendineae and the papillary muscles. There will be a commissural fusion. So all of these echocardiographic features will suggest that it's a rheumatic origin. So this is the diagram of the mitral valve. You have the anterior mitral valve leaflet, you have the posterior leaflet, and this is the coaptation line, the point where they are meeting. Now the commissures are the area where these, so this is the annulus, that is the circumference. This is the annulus of the mitral valve. So near the annulus, the point where these mitral valve leaflets are meeting or they are coapting with each other, they are called as the commissures. So this is the anterolateral commissure, this is the posteromedial commissure. Okay, so this is the anterior leaflet, this is the posterior leaflet. You have the anterolateral commissure, you have the posteromedial commissure. These are the chordae tendineae and the papillary muscle. So this is the subvalvular apparatus. So whenever you're talking about mitral valve, you just don't talk about the mitral valve leaflets. It's basically an apparatus. The mitral valve is basically an apparatus of the annulus, the mitral valve leaflets, the commissures, the chordae tendineae, and the papillary muscle. So this all is a part of mitral valve. So this is the normal mitral valve which is seen. This is a three-dimensional transesophageal echocardiography image of a mitral valve. This view is called as an end-face view, in which you can see the smiling mitral annulus. This is obtained on 3D transesophageal echocardiography. This is the anterior mitral valve leaflet, and this is the posterior mitral leaflet. Now, during rheumatic heart disease, like we discussed, that there will be a valvular thickening, there will be a valvular calcification, there will be a commissural fusion. Now, look at this picture. Here in this case, you can see the valvular leaflets are thickened, they are calcified. You cannot really make out where the commissures are. You can't see, in this view, you can't see the subvalvular apparatus, but in other views, you'll be able to find that there is there is a thickening of the subvalvular apparatus. The entire chordae tendineae, sometimes up to 1/3 or up to 2/3 of the chordae tendineae may be thickened, and you get a characteristic fish mouth appearance of the mitral valve orifice. So these all findings suggest that it's a rheumatic origin, which is not a pathophysiological feature of mitral stenosis. Pulmonary venous congestion, right ventricular dilatation, LV diastolic dysfunction, tricuspid regurgitation, or none of the above. So actually here the answer is none of the above. Now let me break down it for you. So the first is pulmonary venous congestion. You know how pulmonary venous congestion happens. Mitral valve is the opening in between the left atrium and the left ventricle. So whenever the mitral valve area is decreasing, leading to mitral stenosis, the left atrium has to now exert more pressure in order to empty its contents into the left ventricle. Now these increased pressure of the left atrium will be transmitted back to the pulmonary circulation. And once these pulmonary hypertension sets in, you will have pulmonary congestion, because there will be a transudation of fluid from the pulmonary circulation. There will be an extravasation of the fluid leading to pulmonary venous congestion. So you know that pulmonary venous congestion is a manifestation of mitral stenosis. What about right ventricular dilatation? Now that there is pulmonary hypertension because of the mitral stenosis,